The laughter reached me before the words did. That is the part I remember most clearly, even now. 200 people in a hotel ballroom, and the sound of them laughing arrived a half-second ahead of the sentence that caused it. The way thunder sometimes seems to come before the lightning if you are far enough away. I was far enough away. They had seated me at the back, near the swinging doors, where the catering staff came and went. And from there my father looked very small at the podium, a man in a rented tuxedo holding a glass of champagne under a banner that read 30 years of service. He had just said my name. He had said, "And this is my daughter." And the warmth in the room had tilted toward me for exactly as long as it takes a crowd to locate a stranger. Then he finished the thought. "No degree, no future, just freeloads off the family. We keep hoping she'll figure it out." And the room laughed. I want to be honest about what happened inside me in that moment, because the truth is less dramatic than people expect. I did not feel my face go hot. I did not feel the old, familiar urge to stand up and explain myself, to lay the years out on the table like receipts, to make them understand. I had felt that urge 10,000 times across 39 years, and I had learned, slowly and at great cost, that it never once changed a single mind in that family. What I felt instead was something quieter and much more final. I felt a door close, not slammed, just closed, gently, the way you close a door on a room you are never going to use again. I set down my fork. The little clink of it against the plate was lost under the laughter, which was still going. My brother Garrett's the loudest of all, his glass already raised to the joke. My mother, Maureen, was smiling into her wine with her eyes half shut, the way she smiled at things she found charming. My sister-in-law, Whitney, was laughing the polite, performed laugh of someone who wants to be seen agreeing with the host. The strangers laughed because the man at the podium was laughing, and a crowd will follow a confident man almost anywhere, even into the cruelty of a stranger's daughter. There was one person at my table who did not laugh. My niece Paige, who was 14, sat beside me with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes down, and I watched her ears go red the way mine used to. She had been put at the back table too. I understood looking at her that the family had simply made a new one of me, a younger one, and seated her where they would not have to look at her. That, more than anything my father said, is what moved me to my feet. I stood up. I picked up my glass. I was not shaking. I have replayed that moment many times, and the thing that surprises me still is how steady my hand was. Because I was not performing steadiness. There was simply nothing left in me to shake. When you have stopped wanting something, the wanting cannot tremble. A few faces near me turned. My father at the podium saw me rise, and his expression flickered, because in the script he had written, the daughter does not stand. The daughter absorbs it. The daughter laughs along to show she's a good sport, or stares at her plate, and either way the moment passes and the man keeps talking. He did not have a line for the daughter standing up with her glass. "Cheers," I said. My voice carried farther than I expected. The room was already quieting, the way a room quiets when it senses it has missed something. I lifted the glass a few inches, the smallest toast a person can make. "This is the last time any of you will ever see me." Then I drank. I drank the whole thing, unhurried, and set the empty glass back on the white tablecloth, and I turned and walked the length of that ballroom toward the doors. I did not look back at my father. I did not look at my mother. I looked once at Paige, and I think I smiled at her, the kind of smile you give a person to tell them it is not their fault, and it never was. The walk was long. It is a strange thing to walk out of a room of 200 people while every one of them watches you and none of them knows what to say. My heels were quiet on the carpet and then loud on the marble by the doors, and a young waiter, a boy really, stepped ahead of me and held the door open, and the look on his face was the only kind thing in that whole building, besides a 14-year-old girl. He had heard it. He held the door like he was helping me carry something. I stepped into the lobby, and the heavy door swung shut behind me, and the noise of the ballroom was cut off all at once, the way sound stops when you come up out of water. I did not slam anything. I did not cry in the parking lot. I have read enough and lived enough to know that the world expects a scene from a woman in my position, a breakdown, a screamed sentence, a thrown glass. I gave them none of it, and not because I was being strong. I simply had nothing to throw. I had walked into that room as his daughter, and in the time it took the laughter to die, I had become something else, something I had quietly been for 20 years, without their permission or their knowledge. I had become a woman who was finally, completely free of them. I want to tell you the whole of it because the toast is not the story. The toast is only the place the story finally surfaced. To understand why I lifted that glass, you have to understand the 20 years they never bothered to look at, and the $200 and the library card that started all of it. I left home at 18 with no money for college and no place at 1. That part of my father's joke was even true in its way. I did not have a degree. What he left out, because he never knew it and never asked, was why. The autumn I turned 18, I had an acceptance letter in my hand and no way to pay for the first semester. There had been a college fund once. I had heard about it my whole childhood, a thing my parents spoke of the way some families speak of a lake house, a someday. By the time I was old enough to need it, the fund had quietly become Garrett's. No one announced it. No one sat me down. It simply turned out when I went looking that the money had a different name on it now, and the name was my younger brother's, and my mother said the words I would hear in 100 forms over the next 2 decades. Be realistic, Della. Garrett's the one with the future. You'll find something. So I found something. I found a bus out of town. I left with 2 bags and $200 and a library card from the county system that, it turned out, worked at the big central branch in the city. And for the first 2 years, that library was the most important building in my life. I worked days in a diner and then in a parts warehouse. And at night I sat in the engineering and electronics section, and I taught myself, page by page, the things I could not pay a university to teach me. I read about circuits. I read about firmware. I took apart cheap devices on a folding table in a rented room, and I put them back together until I understood why they worked. Nobody drove me to the bus station that day in 2004. I have made my peace with most of it, but that detail still sits oddly in me. They did not throw me out. There was no dramatic eviction, no final fight. They simply did not notice the door. I let myself out, and the town got smaller in the bus window, and somewhere on that road I made a decision that took me 20 years to fully keep. I decided to stop asking to be seen. What I built quietly. By the time I was 21, I had a crude prototype on that same folding table, a control board for a prosthetic hand that cost a fraction of what the medical versions cost, because I had designed it for people who did not have insurance that would cover the medical versions. By 23, I had a name for the company, Verity Medical, and a rented unit with a leaking roof and 1 employee besides me, a brilliant, blunt woman named Nadia Okonkwo, who had walked away from a corporate device job because she was tired of building things only rich people could wear. Nadia is the closest thing I have to family, in the true sense of the word, the sense that has nothing to do with blood. She is 44 now, 5 years older than me, and she has been beside me for 16 years, and she is the one who says the things I need to hear, whether or not I want to hear them. You built half the affordable devices in 3 states, she told me once, a few weeks before the gala, leaning in the doorway of my office while I pretended to read a supplier contract. And you still introduce yourself to people as, I work in medical. You know that's insane, right? You know normal people would have a building named after them by now. I don't want a building named after me, I said. I know you don't. That's the insane part. She studied me for a second, the way she does. You're not humble, Della. Humble people think they didn't do anything. You think you did everything and you just don't want them to look at you while you do it. That's a different thing. That's a scar. She was right, of course. She usually is. I was not hiding because I thought my work was small. I knew exactly how large it was. I was hiding because somewhere in me, a girl at a bus window had decided that being looked at by your own people was dangerous, that it ended in laughter, and that the safest thing a person could do with success was to build it in a room where the door locked from the inside. By the time of the gala, Verity employed 190 people. Our devices were in clinics across more than a dozen states, and in 3 countries I had visited, and 4 I had not. We made hearing aids that a family could actually afford, and prosthetic hands that a child could grow into without a second mortgage. I had spent 20 years putting hands and hearing into people the world had decided to skip, the same way my family had decided to skip me, and if there is a reason I chose that particular work, I suspect that is it. I knew what it was to be skipped. I wanted to build the thing that did not skip anyone. I kept no trophies. I want to be clear about that because people imagine a wall of plaques. There was no wall of plaques. What I kept, pinned edge to edge on the wall of my office, plain paper held with plain tacks, were the letters. Patients wrote to us. A man who could hear his granddaughter for the first time. A woman who could hold a coffee cup with 2 hands again. A boy whose mother wrote that he had stopped hiding his arm under the dinner table. Those were the only trophies I ever wanted. I did not frame them because framing felt like it would make them mine, and they were never mine. They were the proof that the girl at the bus window had been right to stop asking and to start building instead. The first of those letters came when I was 25, and I have it still, the oldest one on the wall, the ink gone soft at the folds. It was from a man named Errol, a retired mechanic in a small town 3 hours from the city, who had lost most of the hearing in both ears and had been quoted a price for aids that was more than 2 months of his pension. A clinic that carried our early devices fitted him for a fraction of that, and a week later he sat down and wrote to the company that made them, which at that point was me and Nadia, and a part-time engineer, and a unit with a bucket under the leak in the roof. He wrote that he had gone to his granddaughter's piano recital and heard her play for the first time, all the way through, every note, and that he had not told anyone at the recital that he was crying because he did not want to explain why. He wanted the company to know, that was all. He did not want anything. He just wanted the people who built the thing to know what the thing had done. I read that letter at a folding table at 11 at night, and I understood, in a way I had not fully understood before, what I had actually walked out of my family to do. I was not building gadgets. I was building the thing that put a man back at his granddaughter's recital. I was building over and over the exact moment my own family had denied me, the moment of being included in a room you had been quietly written out of. I do not think I knew, at 25, how personal it was. I think I told myself it was just good business, an underserved market, a smart place to put cheap engineering. It took me years to admit that I had aimed my whole life at the wound, that every device was a small argument with a town getting smaller in a bus window, that I had spent 2 decades building the welcome I never got and handing it to strangers. Nadia knew before I did. She always knows the thing before I'm willing to say it. We were maybe 10 years in, sitting in the new building, the one with no bucket and no leak, and she looked around at the floor, full of people and the lines running, and she said, without any drama, "You know you're never going to feel like it's enough. You know that, right? You could put a device on every person in the country who needs one, and some part of you is still going to be 18 at that bus station." She let it sit. "That's not a flaw, exactly. It's just your engine. I just want you to know what's running the machine so it doesn't run you off a cliff someday." I did not answer her then. But I thought about it, and I have kept thinking about it, and I believe she was right, and I believe that the engine, knowing what it is, finally stopped running me off a cliff the night I walked out of that ballroom. The engine had been pointed at them my whole life. That night, I turned it, at last, toward myself. To understand the toast, you have to understand that it was not new. My father did not invent the joke that night. He had only finally said the oldest story in our family out loud, in front of the largest room he would ever have. And the largest room had laughed, and so he must have felt, in that moment, more right than he had ever felt in his life. The story was simple, and it was decided early. There were 2 children in our house. Garrett was the bright one. I was the one who would not amount to anything. I do not know exactly when the verdict was reached, because by the time I was old enough to notice it, it was already the weather. Garrett got the new bicycle, and I got the understanding that I should not ask. Garrett got the tutor, and I got told I should try harder on my own. Garrett got the college fund, in the end, and I got a sentence about being realistic. None of it was cruel in the way a slap is cruel. It was cruel in the way a slow leak is cruel, the kind that does not flood the house all at once, but rots the beam over years, until one day the ceiling simply is not there anymore. The thing about being assigned a role that young is that everyone around you begins to edit reality to fit it. When Garrett failed a class, it was because the teacher had it in for him. When I brought home something good, it was luck, or it was me showing off, or it was simply not mentioned. And when I left at 18 and built a life they could not see, the role did not update. It could not. The role was load-bearing. The whole family leaned on the idea that Garrett was the success and Della was the disappointment, and you cannot pull out a beam that the whole house is standing on, not without the people inside it screaming. So they kept the beam. They built around it. Over the years, every fact that contradicted the story got quietly remodeled until it fit. When I brought a good bottle of wine to a holiday, it became evidence that I was trying too hard, putting on airs, pretending. Once, years ago, when my father had a hospital scare and the bills were bad, I sent a check. I never mentioned it again, and neither did they, except that somewhere in the retelling, the check stopped being something I gave and became something I owed. By the time of the gala, in the family's official history, I was the daughter who borrowed money from her parents, the daughter who freeloaded, the daughter with no degree and no future. The check I had written had been turned, through nothing but years and repetition, into its exact opposite. That is the part people who have not lived it find hardest to believe. They assume a lie that large requires a villain, a single scheming person bending the truth. It does not. It requires only a story everyone finds comfortable and the ordinary human refusal to update it. Given enough years, a lie repeated gently becomes the family's furniture. Everyone stops seeing it as a lie. Everyone just leans on it, the way you lean on a couch without thinking about who built it or whether it is even yours. I stopped trying to correct the furniture somewhere in my late 20s. There is a particular exhaustion that comes from being the only person in a room who remembers what actually happened, and I had reached the bottom of mine. So I went quiet. I came to the holidays less. I sent gifts and then I stopped sending gifts because the gifts were only fuel. I built my company and I built my chosen family, and I let the blood family keep their furniture, and I told myself that was peace. It was not peace. I know that now. It was only distance, and distance is not the same thing. Peace is when the wound closes. Distance is just standing far enough from the wound that you can pretend not to feel it. I had confused the two for a long time, and it took a man at a podium and a glass of champagne to show me the difference. Here is the part of the story that the family will never understand. The part that turns a sad story into the one I'm actually telling. 3 weeks before the gala, my phone rang in my office, and it was Dr. Vivian Castellanos. If you do not work in my field, the name means nothing. If you do, it means a great deal. Vivian Castellanos spent a career in medicine and then a second career building one of the largest foundations in the country devoted to making medical technology reach the people who get skipped. She is 61, blunt in a way I have always loved, and entirely uninterested in the social machinery that most powerful people run on. She had presented me with a national award the year before, in 2024, and she had become, over years of crossing paths, something close to a friend. When Vivian calls, I answer. I am doing a thing I never do, she said, without hello, because she never says hello. I said yes to a retirement gala, some company called Sterling Instruments, some 30-year man they want me to send off. I almost said no. Galas bore me to my bones, Della. Then I looked and the date was free and the man apparently mattered to a lot of people, so... She sighed. His name is Marsh, Raymond Marsh. Mean anything to you? You know everyone in this region. I held the phone very still. I remember looking at the wall of letters and feeling the floor of my own life shift quietly under me, the way it does when two parts of you that you have kept in separate rooms for 20 years suddenly find themselves in the same hallway. I know the name, I said. I did not say more. I have asked myself many times since why I did not tell her in that moment that Raymond Marsh was my father, that I would be in that ballroom too, that the universe had arranged a collision I could not have arranged on purpose if I had spent a decade trying. I think the truth is that I did not yet know what I wanted to happen. A part of me, the oldest part, the girl at the bus window, was afraid that if I said it out loud, I would somehow be asking to be seen again, and asking to be seen was the one thing I had sworn off. So I said nothing, and I hung up, and I sat with the strange fact that my father's own employer had reached across the entire country and invited, to honor him, the one person alive most likely to know exactly who his worthless daughter really was. A few days later, my mother left me a voicemail. It was warm, which was rare enough that I listened to it twice. Your father's retirement is coming up, she said. There's a party. It would mean a lot if you came. Come as family, Della. Just come as family. I went because of that voicemail. I want to be honest about that, too. I did not go to be vindicated. I did not go knowing what Vivian would say, because I did not know she would say anything. I went because, at 39 years old, after 20 years of distance, I had been calling peace. Some stubborn and unkillable part of me still wanted to find out whether there was a version of these people who could simply be glad I had come. That is the wound under all of it. Not the money, not the college fund, not even the role. Just a daughter who, against all the evidence of 2 decades, still wanted to walk into a room and have her family be glad. So there were 2 invitations to the same room that night. One for the daughter, one for the speaker. And neither side of the building knew the 2 rooms were the same room. I arrived at the gala a little after 7. I had dressed carefully, which I want to explain, because it matters to what came later. I did not dress to impress them. I wore a simple deep charcoal blazer over a plain silk blouse, the kind of clothes I wear to board meetings, clothes that say nothing about money to anyone who is not looking for it. I have learned that real money is quiet, and that the people who most need to broadcast their worth are usually the ones with the least of it. I dressed the way I dress every day. I dressed like myself. I think part of me wanted to find out whether they could see me when I came as exactly who I was, with no costume in either direction. They could not. Of course they could not. The story was load-bearing. The trouble started before I had my coat off. Garrett found me at the edge of the cocktail hour and steered me toward a cluster of his father's colleagues with a hand on my shoulder, the way you guide someone who might wander off and embarrass you. This is my sister, he told them. She's, between things right now. between things, as though my life were a hallway I had gotten lost in. The men nodded the way people nod at a charity case, kindly and through me, and Garrett's hand stayed on my shoulder, steering until I stepped out from under it. Whitney came at me from a different angle, with the special cruelty of someone who believes she is being supportive. She held my arm and lowered her voice, as if we were sharing something tender. "You know it's never too late to go back to school," she said. "I read about people starting at 40 all the time. Garrett could even look over your application essays. He's so good with words." She squeezed my arm. "We just want to see you land somewhere, Della." "That's kind of you," I said, because it was the truest thing I could say that was not the whole truth, and the whole truth was not for her. Then came the seating. The family was at the head tables near the podium in the warm light. I was at the back, table 19, with the overflow, the plus ones, and the vendors, and a half-empty bottle of the cheaper wine. My mother walked me back there herself, her hand on the small of my back, and she said it the way she said everything that wounded me, gently as a kindness. "We didn't want you to feel out of your depth up front, honey. All that industry talk. You'd be bored." She patted my hand. "You're more comfortable back here, aren't you?" Out of my depth. I had spent the afternoon on a call with a hospital network in another state about a supply contract larger than Sterling Instruments' annual revenue, and my mother sat me at the back so I would not feel out of my depth among my father's middle managers. I did not say any of that. I sat down at table 19, and I put my hand flat on the tablecloth beside my name card, and I held very still, the way I had learned to hold still a long time ago. That was when Paige slid into the chair beside me. She had been seated at the head table, in the good light, the proper grandchild in her proper place. She got up and she walked all the way to the back of the room and she sat down next to her aunt at table 19, and I understood what it cost a 14-year-old to leave the warm part of a room on purpose. She did not look at me at first. She picked at the edge of a napkin. "They're being awful," she said finally, quietly to the napkin. "I just want you to know I don't think you're any of those things. The stuff they say about you, I don't think it's true." I looked at this child who had crossed a ballroom to say that, and something in my chest that I had kept locked for 20 years moved a quarter inch. "Why do you think it isn't true?" I asked her. I was not testing her. I wanted to know what a 14-year-old had seen that 200 adults had not. She thought about it with the seriousness children give to questions adults ask them honestly. "Because you listen," she said. "When I talk, you actually look at me. The people they say are successful don't do that. They look over your head to see if someone better came in." She shrugged, embarrassed by her own clarity. "I figure somebody who builds stuff probably listens, and somebody who's a freeloader probably doesn't." One person at that table saw me clearly. She was 14 years old. I have thought about that more than I have thought about anything my father said. The lights dimmed for the toast. Gordon Pace, a Sterling executive, made the first remarks. 30 years. Dedication, the backbone of the company, the usual warm nothing. Then he handed the microphone to my father, who had asked, apparently, to say a few words about family before the keynote speaker arrived. And my father took the microphone, and he found me at the back of the room with his eyes, and he made the joke he had been making my whole life. Except this time he made it to 200 people, and this time they laughed. "You already know what I did. I have told you the toast." I lifted my glass, and I said the last words I would ever say to them, and I drank and I walked out. But I have not told you the most important thing, which is what happened inside me in the seconds before I stood, because that is where the real story lives. Not in the leaving, in the deciding. In those few seconds, while the laughter was still rolling, I understood something with a clarity I had never had before. I understood that I had spent 20 years building the evidence and never once needing to show it to them, and that I was not going to show it now either. I had imagined this moment, I will admit it, the way anyone imagines vindication. I had imagined standing up and telling the room who I was, watching my father's face change, watching the laughter die in their throats as they realized. I had a speech in me somewhere, a good one, with the company and the states and the award and Vivian's name in it, and in those seconds I let the speech go. I understood that giving the speech would mean I was still playing the game, still trying to win the verdict, still the girl at the bus window asking to be seen. The speech would have been the last audition, the biggest one, and I would have been auditioning for the part of the daughter who deserved respect in front of the very people who had spent 39 years deciding I did not. I did not want the part anymore. That was the thing I finally understood. The decision was not to win. The decision was to stop competing for a verdict that was never going to come, no matter how good my evidence was, because the verdict had never been about the evidence. So I would not give the speech. I would simply leave, and I would let the room find out the truth on its own, without me there to perform it, because the truth did not need me. It never had. It had been standing on its own for 20 years. All I had ever done was apologize for it. So I lifted my glass to that, to the end of apologizing, and I said the truest sentence I have ever spoken, that this was the last time any of them would see me, and I meant it as a fact and not a threat. And then I walked out into the clean, cold air of a choice already made. I did not know, walking to my car, that the door I had just closed behind me was about to be opened from the inside by a stranger with a microphone. I was not in the room for what happened next. I want to be clear about that because it is the part people most want me to have witnessed, and I did not. I have pieced it together since from two people who were my niece Paige, who told me weeks later, in careful, halting detail, and a colleague of Nadia's who happened to be a guest of Sterling Instruments and who described it to Nadia the next morning, still half in disbelief. So what I'm about to tell you, I tell you secondhand. But the two accounts match almost word for word, which is how I know it is true. People do not independently invent the same silence. About 10 minutes after I left, Gordon Pace returned to the podium to introduce the keynote speaker, the surprise the company had been holding back all night, the prestigious guest they had flown in to honor Raymond Marsh's 30 years. He read her introduction off a card, the foundation, the awards she had endowed, the work she had done, and the room made the impressed sound rooms make when they realize someone important has been in the building the whole time. And then Dr. Vivian Castellanos walked up to the microphone in her plain dark suit, with no notes the way she always speaks. She talked about my father first, and by all accounts she was generous. She did not know him, but she knew how to honor a working life, and she spoke warmly about 30 years of steady labor, about the people whose careers a long, quiet career like his makes possible, about the dignity of the man who is not the founder and not the executive, but simply shows up for 3 decades and does the work. My father, I am told, sat up very straight during this, and my mother's eyes filled, and Garrett nodded along like he had arranged it. For a few minutes that night, the Marsh family had exactly the evening they had ordered. Then Vivian came to the end of her remarks, and she did the thing she always does, which is to go off the card. "Before I close," she said, "I have to confess something, and I hope the man of the hour will forgive me." She smiled. When my office told me I was coming out here to honor a Marsh, I will admit my first thought was not of Raymond. My first thought was that I might finally get to stand in the same room as a different Marsh. Della Marsh. And I thought, surely they are related. Surely this is her family, and I have been looking forward all week to meeting them. The room, I am told, did not yet understand. They thought it was a coincidence of names. For those of you who don't know the name, Vivian went on, and I suspect that's most of this room, which I find genuinely remarkable. Let me fix that. Della Marsh is the founder of Verity Medical. If you have a neighbor who can afford a hearing aid that they could not have afforded 10 years ago, there is a real chance it is because of her. If there is a child in this region wearing a prosthetic hand that did not cost their parents everything they had, there is a very good chance she built the thing that made it possible. She has done more to put medical technology into the hands of people who get overlooked than almost anyone alive. And she does it without ever once asking for a room like this to look at her. Vivian lifted her own glass, scanning the tables. So I have to ask, is she here? Is Della Marsh in this room? Because I would have flown twice as far to shake her hand. And the room went silent. I have been told it was not an ordinary silence. It was the specific silence of 200 people turning at once to look at a table near the back, table 19, where a name card still stood beside an empty chair and a single empty champagne glass. The chair of the woman the host had introduced 1 hour earlier as the daughter with no degree, no future, the freeloader, the family joke. They looked at the empty chair, and then they looked at Raymond Marsh. And Raymond Marsh, I am told, looked at the empty chair as though it had caught fire. Paige told me that her grandfather did not say anything. She told me his face did a thing she had never seen it do, that all the certainty went out of it at once, like water out of a cracked glass. And underneath the certainty there was nothing, just an old man who had spent a career being ordinary, and one evening, being cruel about the one extraordinary thing he had ever been near, in front of the only person on earth who could measure it. Paige told me her grandmother reached for her grandfather's arm, and he did not seem to feel it. Garrett, she said, laughed once, a short, confused laugh, looking around for someone to tell him it was a mistake, and no one would meet his eyes because the woman at the podium did not make mistakes about who built what in their field. I did not see any of it. I was on the highway by then, with the windows cracked and the radio low. The truth had done in that room the only thing I had ever wanted from those people, and never once gotten. It had stood up in a full room and said my name correctly. And the most important fact about that, the fact I hold on to, is that I was not there to make it happen. I did not engineer it. I did not deploy it. I had walked out and left an empty chair, and the truth had filled the chair better than I ever could have, precisely because I was gone. The calls started that night. By the time I reached my apartment, there were 4 missed calls from my mother. By morning, there were 11. I did not answer any of them. I'm not going to pretend that took no effort because it took a great deal. There is a sound a phone makes, buzzing itself in slow circles on a kitchen counter that can pull at 20 years of conditioning all at once. But I let it buzz, face down, and I made myself a cup of tea. And I sat with the strangest feeling, which was not triumph. I want to be honest about that. It was not triumph. It was something quieter and sadder, and much more like grief. Garrett texted before my parents did, which tells you everything about Garrett. His message started as an apology and did not stay one for long. "Crazy night," he wrote. "Look, things got said. Dad was a few drinks in. You know how he is. But seriously, what you've built is amazing. We had no idea. Listen, Verity must need a sales guy with my contacts and my people skills. Family helps family, right? Let's get coffee." I read it twice. Even then, with the whole story finally turned right side up, my brother's first instinct was not to say he was sorry. It was to ask what he could get. Family helps family, right? The word family in his mouth had only ever meant a direction money flowed, and the direction was always toward him. The story moved through the town the way these things move, faster than any of them could chase it. Sterling Instruments was not a large company, and Agala is a small world, and by the end of that week, everyone who had been in the ballroom had told everyone who had not. The colleagues my father had played to, the men who had laughed because the confident man at the podium was laughing, now had to sit with the fact that the woman he had called a freeloader was the most accomplished person any of them had been in a room with all year, and that they had laughed at her, and that she had heard them. I am told a few of them came to my father privately and tried to be kind about it, which is its own particular cruelty, because there is nothing that confirms a humiliation like a colleague telling you not to worry about it. Whitney, my sister-in-law, the one who had offered to have Garrett look over my college application essays, sent me a message a few days later. It was long, and it was about herself, the way these things always are. She wanted me to know that she had always seen something special in me, that she had always defended me, that she felt the whole thing had been blown out of proportion, and that she hoped, when things settled, the families could find a way forward. And also, by the way, did Verity ever sponsor community events? Because she was on a committee. I read it, and I felt something that was almost tenderness, because Whitney is not a cruel person. Exactly. She is a person who has spent her life reading the room and adjusting, and the room had just changed. And she was adjusting, and she did not even know she was doing it. She had laughed when the joke was on me, and she would defend me now that defending me was the safe position, and she would never once notice that those were the same instinct pointed in 2 directions. I did not answer her. There was nothing to answer. Even the local paper got a version of it, a short item about Dr. Castellanos visiting the region and praising local innovator Delamarche. No mention of the gala, no mention of my father, just my name in print in the town I had left at 18, a town that had spent 20 years not knowing what I did. My mother, I imagine, read it at the kitchen table. I will never know what she felt. I have stopped trying to write her feelings for her, which is a habit I kept far too long, inventing the inner life of a woman who never once showed me the real one. My father did not text. My father called once, late the second night, and he did not get me, so he left a voicemail, and the voicemail is the only thing from that whole family I have ever come close to keeping. His voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. There was none of the podium in it. "Della," he said, and then a long pause, the kind of pause a man takes when he has discovered, late, that he does not have the words because he never bothered to learn them. "I didn't know," he said. "I want you to know I didn't know." Another pause. "But that's worse, isn't it? That I didn't know. That I never asked. That's worse." And then very quietly, almost to himself, "I'm sorry." And the message ended. I listened to it standing in my kitchen, and I will tell you that it reached me. I am not made of stone. The man on that voicemail was not the man at the podium. The man on that voicemail had finally, at 67, in front of 200 people, been handed the one fact he had spent my whole life refusing to look at. and it had broken something in him that probably needed breaking. I felt the pull of it. I felt the old machinery start up, the machinery that says he is your father, he is old, he is sorry, go back, fix it, be the bigger person, hold the family together, because that machinery had run my whole life, and it does not switch off just because you have learned what it costs. I listened to the voicemail once, then I deleted it. Vivian called me the next morning. She had pieced it together by then, the way sharp people do, from the surname and the empty chair and the things a few guests had said to her after. She did not apologize, which I appreciated, because she had nothing to apologize for. She simply said, in her flat way, "I did not know that was your family. If I had, I would have said exactly the same thing, only louder." And then she said the thing I have kept instead of my father's voicemail. "You were not in the room, Della, and I want you to understand. That is the only reason it landed the way it did. If you had stayed and said it yourself, it would have been a daughter defending herself. Because you were gone, it was just the truth, standing there with no one to argue with. Remember that. The strongest thing you ever do in a room like that is leave before you have to prove anything." I have remembered it. I will remember it for the rest of my life. I need to explain that because from the outside, it can look hard, and I do not think it was hard. I think it was the opposite. I think deleting that voicemail was the first soft thing I had done for myself in 20 years. Here is what I had learned, slowly, at great cost. Being right is cold. I had been right for 20 years. I had been right about the college fund, and right about the role, and right about the furniture they had all leaned on. And being right had kept exactly no one warm, least of all me. My father's apology, real as it was not an offer to make me warm. It was an offer to make himself feel better, and underneath it, if I went back, was the same family, the same load-bearing story, the same beam, and the same ceiling that had spent my whole life slowly coming down. The apology did not remove the beam. It only meant that now, when the ceiling fell, my father would be sad about it. I had spent 20 years standing under that ceiling. I was not going to walk back in just because the man who built it had finally noticed it was unsafe. Nadia came over the third night, uninvited with takeout, because that is what Nadia does. She did not make me talk. She sat on my couch and ate noodles and let me be quiet, and after a while, when I told her about the voicemail and about deleting it, she put her carton down and looked at me with that flat, level look she has. "Good," she said. "You don't think that's cruel?" "I think you've been auditioning for those people since before I knew you," she said. 39 years. You don't owe them a second act, Della. You already gave them the whole first one. 39 years of trying out for a part they cast someone else in before you could walk. She picked her noodles back up. "He's sorry. Great. Let him be sorry over there. Sorry isn't a door you have to walk back through. Sometimes it's just a thing a person says into the space where you used to be." I have turned that sentence over many times. Sorry is sometimes just a thing a person says into the space where you used to be. I think it is the truest thing anyone said to me in that whole season of my life. The cost was real, and I do not want to pretend it was not, because the stories people tell about moments like mine usually skip this part. They end on the empty chair and the silent room, on the vindication, and they let you believe the woman drove off into a clean, happy ending. It was not clean. For weeks after, I grieved. I did not grieve the family I had. I grieved the family I had spent 39 years inventing, the one in my head, the parents who, in some better version of the story, were simply glad I came. That family had never existed, but I had loved them anyway, fiercely, the way you can love a person who is only a hope. Walking out of that ballroom did not just close a door on Raymond and Maureen and Garrett. It closed a door on the imaginary people I had kept alive in their place, and those imaginary people were the ones I actually cried for. You can spend a very long time mourning a family that was never going to show up. But there was one chair at that back table I could not bring myself to close the door beside. There was one person who had crossed a ballroom to tell a grown woman she did not believe the lie. So I wrote to Paige, not an email, a letter on paper, because some things should cost the writer something, an email costs nothing. I kept it short. I told her that what she had said to me at table 19, about listening, about people who build things probably listening, had been the kindest and most accurate thing anyone had said to me in years. I told her that I did not expect anything from her, and that I knew her loyalty had to be to the people who were raising her, and that I would never ask her to choose. But I told her that if she ever wanted to know what I actually did, or how a person teaches herself a thing the world will not pay to teach her, my door was open, and it would stay open, and she did not have to do anything to keep it that way. I told her that being the one who does not laugh is lonely, and that I had been the one who does not laugh for a long time, and that it gets better, and that it is worth it. I addressed the envelope in my own hand, and I set it by my door to mail, and that single envelope, going out from a woman who had just sworn off her whole family, was the truest measure of what I had decided. I had not decided to be cold. I had decided to spend my warmth only where it would actually keep someone warm. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole of it. In the months after, I did the only thing I have ever really known how to do. I went back to work, which is to say I went back to the only rooms that had ever measured me by what I made instead of by what someone had decided I lacked. We opened a new clinic that autumn, a small one, in a town not unlike the town I had left at 18, the kind of place where the nearest affordable specialist is 2 hours away, and so most people simply go without. There was a ribbon to cut, and a local reporter, and a handful of speeches. I did not put my name on the building. Nadia rolled her eyes at me about it, the way she always does, and I let her because she had earned the right, and because she was right. I stood at the back, the way I always do, and I watched a man fit a child with a hand the child could grow into, and I watched the child's mother put her own hand over her mouth, and I thought, this is the room. This is the only room whose verdict I have ever actually needed, and it returns its verdict in the only currency that has ever meant anything to me, which is a thing that works in the hands of a person the world meant to skip, Paige wrote back. It took a few months, and I had told myself not to expect it, but a letter came, and inside it was a photograph of a science fair project, a small contraption she had built, with no adults in the frame, just her and the thing she had made, and a ribbon that was not first place and that she was clearly proud of anyway. On the back she had written, in the careful hand of a kid who does not write many letters, "I built something I thought you'd want to see. It mostly works." It mostly works. I laughed out loud, alone in my kitchen, because that is the truest sentence anyone who builds things ever says, and a 14-year-old had found it on her own. I pinned the photograph to the wall with the patient letters. It is the only thing on that wall that came from my blood family, and it came from the one of them who never had to be argued into seeing me. As for the rest of them, I kept my word. There were no Sunday dinners. There was no slow rebuilding, no holiday détente, no scene a year later where everyone weeps and the family is whole again. I know that is the ending people want, because it is the ending that lets everyone off the hook. The one where the cruelty was just a misunderstanding and a good cry fixes 39 years. That ending was not available, and I have stopped pretending it was a tragedy that it was not. My father wrote me one more letter, an actual reckoning this time, no podium in it, just an old man's honest accounting of the things he had gotten wrong, and I read it, and I was glad he had written it, and I did not write back, because writing back would have been the start of a road I had already decided not to walk. My mother tried twice to come by. I did not open the door. Garrett, true to himself, eventually stopped reaching out when it became clear there was no job in it for him. I want to be careful here because I do not want this to sound like victory. It was not victory. They never saw me again, exactly as I had said, and I have never once missed the table. Both of those things are true, and neither of them is a celebration. It is simply what was left when I stopped paying for a seat at a table where the price was always going to be myself. I drove out to that town again in the spring, the new clinic town, to check on the place, and on the way back I took the long road, the one that runs past the kind of bus station I left from at 18. I did not stop. I just slowed down a little, and I looked at it. A small brick building with 2 benches and a vending machine, the kind of nothing place where a life can turn without anyone noticing. I thought about the girl who had stood there with 2 bags and $200 and a library card, watching her town get smaller, deciding to stop asking to be seen. I wanted to tell her something. I wanted to lean across 20 years and tell her that the deciding to stop asking was the right call, but that she had gotten one thing wrong. She had thought that the goal was to stop being seen. It was not. The goal was to stop needing the wrong people to see you, so that one day you could be seen plainly by the right ones and not flinch. I have a small house now, nothing grand, with a kitchen that gets the morning light, and a wall of letters, and one photograph of a science fair project that mostly works. There is a table in that kitchen, a round one, and every seat at it is a good seat, and no one who sits there has to earn the chair. I built all of it. Not the way my father built 30 years at one company, steady and unremarkable, and in its own way, worthy of a toast. I built it the other way, the way the world told me did not count, the way without the degree and without the fund and without the family, the way they laughed at, right up until a stranger with a microphone made them stop. I do not think about them often anymore. That is the part that would have shocked the girl at the bus window most of all. Not the company, not the award, not Vivian Castellanos saying my name into a silent room. The thing that would have shocked her is the not thinking about them. She believed, that girl, that the ache would be with her forever, that you carry your family's verdict like a stone for the rest of your life. You do not. You carry it until you set it down, and you can only set it down by deciding the verdict was never yours to win and walking out of the room while it is still being argued. If you have made it this far with me, I suspect it is because some of this is yours too. I suspect you know what it is to be the one they laugh at, the one with the role assigned early, the one whose good news gets called luck and whose every gift gets turned over years into evidence against you. So let me tell you the one thing I carried out of that ballroom, the only thing worth carrying. You do not owe anyone the lifelong project of changing their mind. You can spend your whole life building the evidence, polishing it, waiting for the moment you finally lay it down and they finally see, and I am here to tell you that the moment, if it ever comes, will not feel the way you imagined. Because by the time the evidence is undeniable, you will have learned that their seeing you was never the point. So stop building the case. Build the life instead. Do the work in the rooms that measure you fairly. Keep the people who cross the ballroom to sit beside you. And let the truth find its own way into the rooms you have left. It does not need you there to perform it. It will stand up on its own and say your name correctly, and the most peaceful thing in the world is to already be gone when it does. And if a door has to close for you to breathe, close it. Not with a slam, not with a scene. Just close it gently, the way you close a door on a room you are never going to use again. And then keep your word and go build a table of your own where every seat is a good seat and no one ever has to be the joke. That is the last paper I will ever need from them. I wrote it myself. Take care of yourself. And if you are the one who does not laugh, know that there is a whole life waiting on the other side of the door you are afraid to close. I will see you there.